equity is not equality. We are talking about gender equity in education. We need to make the difference between equity and equality. Equality may not lead to equity. Equity will always lead to equality. Let's look at how these things are achieved. So the notion and fact of equity is driven by the goals of social justice and support to attain it. It is based on an understanding of a differential segmentation in society. That means there is no level playing field. If there is no level playing field, then how do we bring everyone to a level where they can have, the most important word here, access to education? I'm talking about education because there's gender equity in education. I think that this is a very, very central notion, and I'll just elaborate on that too. Both equity and gender are nuanced ideas, especially in educational institutions where equal opportunity is assumed to attain equity. This may not always be so. So, structures of access are crucial, and they have to be, you can have all the empowerment in your institution, but if somebody cannot access your cannot get in through your gates, those empowerment mechanisms are worth really nothing. So, access is very important. Gender is a loaded word and is almost always interchangeably used for women's issues, in inverted commas. However, gender has obvious intersectionalities, some of which have been mentioned already by the chair and others, but I'll just quickly go over them. The intersectionality of gender with class, with caste, which is in our society almost interchangeable with caste, region, rural, urban. It is an intersectionality with community. And then, very importantly, it is an intersectionality with transsexuality, sexual identities, which educational institutions have begun to grapple with. What do we do with, how do we address gender in a transsexual situation? And it's very important because everybody has a right. It has an intersection, gender has an intersection with disability, because for women, a disabled woman, it's a double whammy. For a disabled, marginalized person, it is a man or woman or trans, it's a triple whammy. So let's be very careful. Digital literacy. It has an intersectionality with digital literacy. We have seen how many things have been said. With biological roles, certainly. And we can think of a very large segment of very educated, very accomplished women dropping out of higher research and employment because of marriage and child rearing. So biological roles are very important. Gender has an intersection with age. That's another intersectionality of age. And so does digital literacy. I'm carrying a paper and I'd like to use a pencil, and I noticed that all my co-panelists are paper pencil people. And I've seen young people coming from Deloitte when they come to recruit, and while I was talking, they were writing notes. I said, my dear child, I thought you were the digital generation. Says, no, we prefer to write. It just stays there and is easily accessible. So there's something about paper and pencil which is very reassuring. And then in an educational institution, gender has intersectionality with service rules. And there, it's not enough to do a gender audit. It has to be backed by a financial audit system which facilitates gender equity. Again, we can talk about these. So all these replication of hierarchies, indeed, and all these and other variables form the coordinates of gender categories in educational institution, because we deal with at least 3 clear categories. students, teachers, and the non-teaching staff, which is a huge spectrum. So all these touch them. And other stakeholders are also there, but at least these three an educational institution cannot get away from. So what would you do? Regarding this emergence post-pandemic, or rather during the pandemic, the emergence of a digital life for everybody came with its problems. And in a women's institution, I pick up a couple of things from the Global Dialogue Forum preamble also, which says the sanctuary of a home. This word sanctuary is something that we would, in women's institutions, examine critically. And that's where it also brings us to the intersectionality with class. If you have a room of your own, great. If you have a private space, great. If you're sharing, we've been facilitating mental health issues that have arisen. We've been counseling online, but for that, not only devices, but a space is required for women to be in from where they can articulate, because most of the problems originate where they are sitting. So paucity of space, the size of homes, the kind of domestic violence or intimidation or hierarchization that women face or trans face around. A cyber cafe was mentioned. During the lockdown, it was one of the most intense periods of curtailing of all kinds of movements. If anyone could get to slip out, it would be the boys, not the girls. And then, what does digital learning mean for women? Please let us all recall, we are all women here who are working outside. The educational institution, I can't keep coming back to that, but it could be any workplace, is also a refuge. It's also a safe haven for those who have to get out of their homes. A woman teacher, doesn't matter university or otherwise, first has to fulfill her all the domestic roles at home, because she's not going out to work. वो थोड़ी बाहर जा रही है. तो सबको खाना देना, नाश्ता देना, सब कुछ करिए. And then अगर आपकी 8:30 बजे class है, as we put, as you know, as governance people, as a principal, 8:30 my timetable begins. So if you have an 8:30 class, you're going to be there, and then you need those, back-to-back classes, because it just goes on. And digital life is so hard on women workers. And it is a matter of concern to me at my age and at my stage and looking at things that, it is not a good idea to carry this on. It was possibly the only way that the education system or institutions or learning could be saved. At the moment when it was brought in, it was the only way. Regardless of lack of devices, regardless of preferential treatment given to the access to devices, and it's not only devices, a mobile does not ensure literacy or other things. There is connectivity, of course, which was mentioned. There is also recharging money. What all can you download? How many can you download? How much space do you need? And these have been issues that have come up as we have dealt with sometimes first-generation learners, because at the education institution today is an entire spectrum of society, thank God, due to affirmative action. It is not just those who have the wherewithal who access education. It's across the board. And how do we talk about the last mile usage? How do we talk about the last person on the bottom of the rung? That is our concern for equity. How do we bring her up to that place to give her a level playing field? So yes, we can give devices. We did give devices. But at the end of the day, that continuous recharge, if you're going to go online, time zones different. I've just come back from Europe, where we were addressing the entire world, including Siberia, Ukraine, etc., in online lectures. So we had to eventually post them for download at their convenience, because in real time, they cannot be accessed all the time, because the time zones are different. So let us be mindful that these things play their part. Now, I would also, I like the preamble actually. It has the right note of caution. It is not an enthusiastic overflow. So I truly appreciate that preamble which GDF has, at least I have received it. I don't think you have, but I have, because, and that's how I got the, at my office, I got a printout of that GDF, the entire brochure. And the preamble, I'm not a statistics person. I will only tell you stories. I come from literature and cultural background, so I will tell you stories. So I need to read from the first word to the last word and look at the fine print. So I've read that preamble very carefully, and I was very reassured by the fact that it was not an enthusiastic overpouring of, lauding this new world order which has come in, the fourth revolution, I think it was called. It is a revolution, no doubt. And why is it a revolution? Because of AI. Even people who do not know anything, like my cook in my mother's kitchen, can make anything because he talks to the phone. He talks to the phone and he gets the recipe. So there are ways in which this technology can be negotiated. But what are going to be those ways in educational institutions are the avenues that we have to explore to see how we can have gender equity. Gender equity, or show up lack of it in educational institutions and other organizations, and interventions may be planned, but interventions have to be backed by financial structures of support. I give you one very small example. In the teachers section, at least in the University of Delhi, permanent teachers have access to all the facilities. I think that may be the case in all institutions, including, let us come to the biological rules, maternity leave, childcare leave, etc. Now, it doesn't mean that somebody who's not permanent is not in the same state of maternity. Do we have a way of supporting her? The answer is no. It would be an audit objection. There would be a recovery. There would be no leave given. I think that these are the structures that we need to call out the government on if they are talking seriously about gender equity. Because without that, there cannot be equitable. As a woman, I see no difference between two women who are childbearing. But I cannot, even in my position as principal, do anything about it to facilitate that period, except offer my own help. Similarly, equity therefore must place structures bearing which we do not penalize those who fulfill their biological roles, and this happens across the board in many professions. If a woman takes time out, she loses on promotion, she loses on period of service, she loses her turn, etc., from the highest echelons. Right? So we need to think about that. The other very fraught issue is that also of harassment of all kind, but sexual harassment in particular, and it's across the board again. And here I want to say, from a women's college and experience point of view, that just having an internal complaints committee does not achieve your end. It is our duty to ask, because we have faced those situations, to find out what form of redress, what is the mode of redress that the girl seeks. Sometimes they are so conservative, often actually in our social fabric, that they do not want to go in front of a committee. But they seek action. What are we to do in educational institutions in that position? How are we to ensure that there is redress of the affected party without the exposure that she does not want. And if she does not want, we will not give it. That is the principled position of at least myself as principal. So the mode of redressal may not always be the internal complaints committee, though every organization should have one by an act of parliament, I think now. So the difference between an electronic one and a manual one was only 500 rupees. So the decision we took was to install a manual one because we wanted it to be accessible to our female sanitation workers also, those who look after the toilets. Without, having to go into a tizzy, ye kaise chalta hai, ab kya kare, nahi kare. That decision we took. Perhaps it was a dent in the body of digital literacy, true. But when that time comes for an emergency, in a biological position, women should have little patience. Little patience means little patience than what they are taught to have, less patience. So we took that decision. Perhaps it was not the right decision, I can't say. We've just installed it, just replaced one. But I feel that it had greater access. And that's how, in these small ways, in a need-blind admission policy, we don't go through the whole, after you come in, take an education loan from somewhere, some neighbor, come in, and then you're going to take 6 months to process your free ship form. No. On the spot. Even the NEP envisages a need-blind admission policy. I came across it in the USA when I went as a Fulbright Nehru International Administration Fellow there, way back in 2011. Need-blind admission policy is, if somebody is eligible for your institution, you just pay. The institution just pays for her to get in. You just give the money to get in. And then do your formalities later. At that moment, she must have access. This policy has been followed in my college since 2011, much before NEP, to date. Now there is some change of fee structure being proposed, so we don't know where we are going from here. Also, the first thing that I did, and this will be my last example, because this is not about me, was create a 100% barrier-free access college, for which we got the NCP-DP award also for universal design. Because let us remember, enabled or an abled body is a temporary condition. Disability can strike anybody. Even if you don't have good knees, you cannot climb the stairs to the 3rd floor of the library, so a lift was installed. Many measures were taken. Today, Indraprastha College for Women, ever since actually 2011 again, has been a 100% barrier-free institution. I'm sure there is a lift which comes here to this floor. I was not able to use it. I took the stairs and I was thinking of this. I'm sure that we don't think that we need to put at least 2 hooks on the back of ladies' toilet doors. You will find new structures, including in the best NAC accredited institutions, but the ladies' toilet will not have a hook on the back of the door. Those are the things that I notice. So when I prepare the college for reopening, my instruction to the caretaker is, har darwaze ke piche 2 hook hain ki nahi, dekh lena. So these are the little attention to details that we must cultivate as men and women of a responsible society who are talking about equity. We know that most girls drop out from schools at adolescence because there are no toilets. There is no privacy for their menstrual problems. We know that. So let us be very sensitive to biology, to bodies as sites of gender. The body is a site of gender. With masculinities, the intersectionality of gender with masculinities, you spoke about that, very important. Creating safe spaces, very important. So I think that all of us have stakes in creating this kind of equity, especially in educational institutions, because that's where from it fans out into various levels of society at various levels of the family, at various levels of the polity. Thank you very much for your patience.